All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. I want to apologize, first of all, for my voice, okay? I am sick as a dog, so please just bear through it with me. I would greatly appreciate it. But I do want to talk about what Sean Strickland's coach, Erick Nicksick, had to say about Sean Strickland and his performance at UFC 312 on Ariel Helwani's show, because it was pretty ruthless, okay? Also very honest. There's some things that he said that I disagree with, also some stuff I agree with, but there's also a few things that I'm a little bit torn on, so I would also appreciate you guys letting me know what you think down in the comments below, okay? Honestly, I do like the approach that Erick Nicksick takes when it comes to tough love and not being a complete and total yes man, like some coaches that we do see. Someone that comes to mind is John Kavanaugh, but there was also some things that he said that, depending on what he means, seem a little strange to me, okay? And I want to go over all of that, so let's just get into it. Take a look at this first clip.
What do you make of what happened on Saturday night or Sunday in Sydney? What do you make of your guys' performance in the fight now a couple of days later?
Oh, it was just uninspired fighting to me. It just seemed like he was sleepwalking, you know. Yeah, it was tough, man. I was just trying to dig him out of it, through the rounds. I didn't know if he was trying to collect data in the beginning or if it was just a slow start or what was going on. But, as the rounds began to progress, I can just tell that it just didn't feel like he was in it the way most of the times that he is. So, yeah, it was tough, man. It was tough 25 minutes to travel all the way out there, and like, man, let's not forget, this is a title fight. And I take these title fights very seriously, and just, I don't know, I was just disappointed, man. I was disappointed with the whole entire outcome, the whole fight as a process. Just thought it was just kind of flat.
Were you expecting?
Okay, now nothing overly crazy yet, but keep in mind this is just 1 minute into the interview, and the reason I included this clip is for context, so we can kind of get an idea of how he was feeling throughout the interview. And the more he gets asked about it, the more and more ruthless his answers become, the more brutally honest they become. But already he's talking about how disappointed he was, how it was uninspiring fighting. He even brings up the travel, right? That makes it even more disappointing. They had to fly across the world, basically 16-hour time difference, to go and have a performance like that. And talks about how, and this is a little bit of foreshadowing, he takes world title fights very, very seriously. And we, hear more about that later on. Let's just jump ahead to the next clip.
So obviously in the aftermath, there's been a lot of criticism thrown his way, in large part because he's such a boisterous and kind of outspoken, outlandish personality. But he also, not just when talking about regular stuff, if you want to call it regular stuff, politics and all this stuff, he says things like he's going to fight to the death. And obviously that's not really what we saw on Saturday. Do you think that the criticism is warranted? Do you think that it has been fair?
Yeah, of course I do. I do. I mean, we have to be real. Like, it just was a very underwhelming performance in an opportunity to fight for a title. There's people in this sport that never even realize that potential to ever even be an opportunity to fight for a championship. That should be enough to get you motivated, to get you off the couch. So, it just to me was we didn't perform. So that's all. It's on all of us. It's on me as a coaching staff. It's on John, and I think he needs to evaluate what he wants to do in this sport. If it's just to make money, then that's great. Let us know. I want to coach world champions. So my motivations are different, so I think that, just to kind of show up and do that and not really back it up, just to me was just kind of uninspiring.
Okay, now there's quite a bit there. Some stuff I agree with, and again, some stuff I'm torn on. And it was a bit of the foreshadowing that I was talking about earlier has now come to fruition. So let's just talk about the beginning, okay, for just a little bit. Now, I really appreciate a coach like Erick Nicksick being honest and saying, yes, 100% the criticism is warranted, because so many other coaches do not act like this. They will not be that honest. And it reminds me of when you see a fighter in a close fight for 2 rounds and the coach goes and tells them that they are up 2, you see them go and coast and then lose a decision. Erick Nicksick is not that kind of coach. He will tell you. He's not going to mince words, and I greatly appreciate that. Now, the part that I'm a little bit torn on is the ending there. When Erick Nicksick starts talking about his motivations being different than a guy who just wants to fight for money, and that if Sean Strickland just wants to fight for money, he should let them know, because, you know, they want to coach world champions. Now, this is kind of strange to me, if I'm being honest, and I feel like he's not being consistent with all his fighters, okay? Because number one, I can't think of anybody that Erick Nicksick has currently that is a world champ, that will be a world champion, right? We have guys like Dan Ige, guys like Manel Kape. I mean, Francis Ngannou, sure, but he's not in the UFC. And also, you know, Erick Nicksick talks about not wanting to coach guys who are just fighting for money. Well, he was perfectly fine to go take those massive paydays to corner Francis in boxing fights that, while maybe Francis thought he could be world champion, it was a very unrealistic goal. So I can't really tell if he's talking about a mindset or if he's talking more about realistically having his fighters become champions. Because why would you talk like this about Sean Strickland but not talk like this about Chris Curtis? Is Chris Curtis fighting for championships? Like, it's very odd to me that he framed it like that or phrased it like that. But I do kind of understand what he's saying, and he gets a little bit more ruthless with this concept in just a little bit. But let's get to the next clip.
So very similar analysis to what we heard from Dean Thomas, who was on our show yesterday in studio. I don't know if you saw that, but he was quite critical, honest, whatever you want to say about Sean, saying he's just not that guy. He says he's that guy. He says he's the to the death guy, but he's not that guy. What is your response to that assessment?
You know, I think he's right to say that in this particular fight.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that is I think that it's a broad brush to paint off after one fight. You know, it wasn't our night. It was very flat, very uninspiring night. But I don't think that that's necessarily Sean as a person, or I mean, as a fighter. And we've seen him in these wars. We've seen him in these fights. We know he's capable of it. Right. So just to say that, like, you know, he's not that guy. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't that night. That's for sure.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this is one of the instances that I'm a little bit torn on. Okay. Because I do kind of agree with Dean Thomas saying, you're not that guy, pal. However, okay, I want to call out Dean Thomas a little bit here, because he would never speak like this about other fighters. He sat there and listened to Anthony Smith tell him that he was trying to get hurt against Dominic Reyes, okay? Trying to lose that fight, essentially, because he wanted to feel pain. And Dean Thomas just let him say it and agreed with him, took it at face value. But because so many people dislike Sean Strickland, they're a lot more open and honest and willing to be brutal in their assessment of him. So while I do kind of agree with Dean Thomas, keep that same fucking energy, pal, when you're talking about Anthony Smith next time, okay? Now, when it comes to Erick Nicksick, I do kind of agree with what he said as well, and this is what I mean by I'm torn on it, because I hear a lot of criticism before this fight, even of Sean Strickland, that I don't know is completely warranted, okay? And I want to hear your guys' opinion about this in the comments. But when people often criticize him for having a boring fight style and things like this, jabs and teeps, but talks about going to war and dying for you guys and all this shit, right? Obviously, it's over the top. But when Sean Strickland is in a fight against Apollo Costo or against a guy like Israel Adesanya, and they are on the back foot for 25 minutes, and Sean Strickland is walking into range with his lead hand down, and walks into punching range, and they're backing up the whole fight, who's really to blame for that fight being boring? Okay, I don't think it's always 100% Sean Strickland's fault. So this is why I'm a little bit torn, because I do agree with Dean Thomas's assessment, where he's like, he talks such a big game, and then he goes out there and Sean Strickland is a very defensive fighter, okay? Right? That Philly shell, he does not like to get hit, but he likes to be in boxing range and just jab and teep 1-2s. His hooks are not all that great, you know? But I also agree with what Erick Nicksick said. It is a bit of a broad brush, and we have seen him in good fights before. Oftentimes it's when guys are trying to not be on the back foot for 25 minutes. So either way, let's move on to the next clip.
Can can I ask you a blunt question that I don't think I've ever asked a coach before, but you're so open and honest, and I appreciate that very much. And you were sort of alluding to something along these lines, so I feel like I just have to ask it. If this is the type of performance that we are set to see from Sean in the future, do you not want to coach him anymore? Do you not want to work with him anymore?
Yeah, I think that that's a fair assessment that I would have to sit down with Sean and talk to him about, right? Like, you know, where can my services be of help for you? You know, I think as a coach, you get credit for things you don't do essentially as much, and you get the blame for things that you might not do as well. So you got to be right there in the middle. But in situations like this where your motivations might change, and if that's the case, if his motivations have changed to something different, where it's like, hey, I prefer to fight for money or a paycheck, and it's not to be the best or be a world champion, then yeah, I think as a coach and fighter, we should sit down and have that conversation. And you know, I love him, man. He's a great teammate. He's a great guy. You guys heard me say that time and time again. But you know, if your fights aren't to be the best in the world and they're for money, then that's not really what I'm looking for. I want to compete against the best. I want to win world titles.
Okay,
and, you know, that's my main focus and
Helwani
goal.
oftentimes
Have you
gets
had
a
that-
lot of shit, but I was very glad and kind of surprised that he asked this question. Okay, it was very blunt, like he said, but I feel like he thought he might actually get a good answer out of Erick Nicksick because of how honest he was being throughout the entire interview, and he was right. Okay, and this is kind of fucking crazy that he's saying this here on a show, and he keeps talking about the fighting for money thing, and I find it very fucking strange. You know, I brought up Manel Kopp earlier. There's a lot of people that thought he could be champion. He's very inconsistent. He misses weight. You know, a lot of your guys are probably not going to be champions. So I don't understand why you'd be okay with coaching them, but you're not okay with coaching a guy like Sean Strickland if he just wants to fight for big paychecks. It's just kind of strange to me. It makes me think that there is something else going on there. Sean Strickland does seem like a very uncoachable person, although it might just be what we see from him, clips and things like that. But even when in between rounds, his coaches are trying to talk to him and he's walking all over the place. Now, Erick Nicksick said this is normal, and he does think that Sean is listening. It's just how Sean is. If I was a coach, or if that was one of my pupils, I would be extremely frustrated. It seems almost disrespectful in a way that they're like walking around not looking at you. You can't tell if they're listening or not. And you know, Sean, he just seems like a tough guy to coach. And so I'm not sure if it's just what he's saying about wanting to fight for money or if there's something else that's underlying there. Now, when he said this, I had assumed, of course, because he's saying it on such a large platform, that he must have already had this conversation with Sean Strickland. But listen to this next clip.
Have you had that conversation with him yet?
No, you know, he came in today for practice, and he was here for a brief minute. We had a brief exchange and kind of heard some of the things he had to say, just about like the travel and things like that. So, but you know, I think a good sit down and a good conversation about where his head's at. Give him a week or so, and then we'll sit down and we'll talk.
What was the
Okay, well, honestly, dude, that's kind of crazy to me. Now, I appreciate Erick Nicksick's honesty throughout this entire interview, but like I said earlier, I would have assumed if you were going to be going public with all of this, you probably would have already spoken to your pupil, and then we find out that you haven't even spoken to Sean Strickland about this issue you're having, this dilemma that you are having internally yet, and that's just a little strange to me. Okay, it made me think that he maybe should have been a little less open and honest, and the only reason I say that is because oftentimes when there is a difficult conversation that needs to be had between individuals, and I'm sure many of you have dealt with this as well, you don't want to find out through somebody else. You want to find out through that person directly, or vice versa. You should be telling that person directly yourself. Sean Strickland is bound to see this. This interview has gotten over 100,000 views as of this morning. It's probably a lot higher than that now. So Sean Strickland's bound to hear it, and it would honestly bother me probably a little bit if my coach was contemplating not coaching me anymore and I found out through an interview rather than him speaking to me privately first. You know what I mean? So like I said, while I'm appreciative of his honesty, this one made me feel a little bit weird when he said that he hadn't spoken to him yet. And again, I'm having a tough time understanding why this is the criteria for Sean Strickland, but not a guy like Chris Curtis, not a guy like Dan Ige or Manel Kopp or any of these guys, or why you're perfectly fine to go take big paydays with Francis Ngannou, whose main goal was fighting for money, and that was, he stated as such, right? So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I apologize if this was a little incoherent. Okay, my brain is fucking destroyed right now. I'm exhausted, but like and subscribe, all that good shit. I'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.